Hello and welcome to another Sprues and Brews unboxing. Today we're looking at Warcrow, Winds from the North by Corvus Beli. Now Corvus Beli you might know for Infinity, which is a science fiction skirmish game that I think it's fair to say has been pretty popular in the kind of non-GW circles.
Yeah, it's been going for quite a while now, very well supported. I think it's in its 4th edition and they've got some other sort of the Code 1 alongside it, which is like the, I mean, if you compare it to sort of Age of Sigmar now, the Spearhead version of Age of Sigmar 4th edition. And then now they're sort of leaning into a new fantasy IP, Warcrow, which originally was introduced as a Kickstarter dungeon crawler board game, Warcrow Adventures, which was set in this sort of new universe. And now we've got in front of us the Skirmish Miniatures game. Yeah,
so first of all, massive thanks to Corvus Beli for sending us a review copy over. We're going to have a load of Warcrow content up on the site. Jay, you're going to be diving into this box, aren't you, with a full written review. We're going to do some battle reports. We might even have some painting articles and stuff, because I know you are super excited about this. We played it at the UK Games Expo and we were both really impressed with it.
It was a highlight of the expo for me, really was, yeah.
So this is the Winds from the North 2-player introductory battle pack, to give it its full name, and it's very much kind of, if you spin it over, framed as a teaching people how to play Warcrow, which is a nice way of doing it. I think they've done similar with Infinity with the Code 1, haven't they?
Yeah, that's right. With Code 1 you tend to get similar sized boxes with 2 factions in. Scenery, dice, all the things you needed to play to get started with the game. It was like introductory rules, so it teaches you the main concept, the sort of mechanics and concepts of the game, and allowed you like leaping sort of stone into the full sort of N4 Infinity rules. And yeah, I think you're right. This is very similar sort of model they've used here as well.
Yeah, they managed to cram a lot in this fairly slimline box as well. You get 14 miniatures. 7 of the Disciplined Hegemony of Embersig, is that right? And 7 for the Northern Tribes, who are the Orcs. I think they've got some trolls and stuff in there as well.
Yeah, there's some cool. I mean, you can go onto the Warcrow official website and it breaks down all of the factions. These are just 2 of the factions. I believe there's 6, maybe a few more factions. Yeah, so the Northern Tribes are your sort of mix of Orcs. And when we were at the expo, we saw some additional miniatures in the cabinet for the Northern Tribes, the skin changes, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So. And obviously you get the introductory rules and a whole battlefield, so a play mat and a load of card scenery and all the dice and doodads and stuff that you need. So shall we crack this open, Jay, and have a look what is inside? So if we slide all this out of here, like I say, it's quite a slim line box really. Let's have a look at the miniature side of things first. So
the first thing I spot there is that these are resin miniatures.
They are resin miniatures. Now let's see if these will show up on camera. What we're going to do is at the end of the video as well, we'll have these assembled and painted as well so you can see them properly. But if we just take maybe one of the Orcs out of the baggies. Now Corvus Beli normally do metal miniatures, don't they?
Yeah, for a long time they were metal miniatures, very detailed metal miniatures. Recently they have been producing plastic and resin miniatures as well.
Yeah.
For the Infinity line, so.
Yeah, these are really nice sculpts as well. We managed to see, I think we saw the production resin ones at the show, painted up, and they were very, very nice.
Oh yeah, they were very, very impressive models. I mean, that's the good thing I like about Corvus Beli miniatures, Infinity, over the that your sort of armies, your war bands, constructed of individual miniatures. They look almost like Warcry. Really, really cool, sort of unique models in your war band.
And there's some really nice details on these as well. You know, you're certainly not losing anything by being in resin rather than metal. If anything, I think resin's a little bit easier to work with, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we won't get all of those out on here because I think what we'll do in the second half of the video, we'll show these built and painted up because I think that'll be a little bit.
You get 14. So looking here, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Orcs and 7 of the Hegemony of Embersig.
Yeah. So obviously we get bases for everything. They're all on the same base size. Now I think they're approximately 32mm. I haven't got a tape to hand to check those, but they are all slaughter bases as well with pegs. So depending on how they're attached, you could drill a hole in or cut a slot. I think a lot of these will just stick directly onto them.
Yeah.
but obviously that leaves it open for if they do metal models in the future. I don't know. We also get some custom dice as well. Now this is a core part of Warcrow, isn't it?
Yeah, and this is where it diverges a little bit from Infinity. So Infinity uses a D20 system. Warcrow uses these custom D8s, are they?
Yeah, the D8s. There's lots of different symbols on them. Now, I think there's some similarities on the symbols across them, but different colours have got... Some colours have got better values on them than others, for example.
Yeah, so you've got a mixture there of defensive dice, which I think are your blue, green and black, and then your offensive dice, which are red, orange and yellow. And you're right, yeah, they've got different combinations of these symbols. So you've got your hits on there, you've got your defences, but then there's these things called switches, which are your sort of exclamation marks. And when we have a look at the sort of... unit rules, you'll see that those are used to activate abilities on the model profile.
Well, that segues quite nicely because you do get stat cards for all the miniatures in the box as well. Now, Corvus Beli are normally really good with kind of free rules and stuff. A lot of the stuff is app-based for Infinity, but for this you have got stat cards for every unit in this box, and presumably when new models are released, they'll be included with these stat cards as well. Now you can see we've got the various kind of weapons and defensive abilities, and that will kind of call out a number of dice that you get to roll. And then there's some other abilities where, say, if you get an exclamation mark, it will activate something else on the card, for example.
Yeah.
They're really nice, really nice cards, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I found in Age of Sigmar, where you can get the War Scroll cards, traditionally, they've always been very useful in games. And these are quite well sized, I think. I mean, they're slightly bigger than a playing card, aren't they? But they're much smaller than the Warhammer Age of Sigmar War Scroll cards.
Yeah.
All the information you need on there to use the unit. Yeah, I really like these.
And they are dual language as well.
Yeah.
With the Spanish on one side, because obviously it's a Spanish company, so you have got the English on the reverse as well. So yes, that's all the cards that we get in the box. Now there is a lot more stuff in here. If we take the miniatures out of the way, underneath that we have the full introductory booklet that has the starter rules in there and essentially a campaign that kind of talks you through playing the game. We'll look at that in full in a little bit, but first of all let's have a look at the cardboard stuff in here as well, because I think that's pretty cool. Presumably they're going to sell this separately outside of this box because it is all barcoded up and everything as well.
Yeah, I think for the Infinity system they tend to do that, yeah.
And you see you've got assembly instructions inside there, so it's all kind of slot together, fairly, you know, basic, but I've seen some good stuff done with this kind of like push-fit scenery. You know, you can, if you super glue it so it's a bit more sturdy, and then add some like weathering and, you know, touch up the paint to hide the cardboard, they do really well. Yeah. So if we move that out of the way, we do have a full playmat here as well. Now again, it's just a kind of a card sheet. It's not the biggest playmat in the world, but it's only I think it's 2 foot by 2 foot playing surface.
Yeah.
It's not double-sided, sadly, but I'm sure people will bring out neoprene ones. I mean, you can already get neoprene ones of that size anyway.
In EU and places like that.
We played on quite an impressive demo board at the UK Games Expo.
It was a sculpted board with some ruins and whatnot.
Yeah, but it was still on this small playing surface because you've only got 7 models, you know, give or take aside. Yeah. You don't need a massive surface, which for me, that's really cool that you're able to play this on a dining room table.
You can play on a dining table and you've got space to put your dice, to put your cards alongside it, so
yeah,
it's really nice.
Now also in here, now I need to make sure I don't lose this bit, we've got a little plastic thing for the dial, because that's the key part of the game that we'll see again later on. And then yeah, this is fairly thick, in fact quite thick, double printed scenery tiles.
I mean, I think this is a really, really good move, because, you know, if you're new to the game, you pick up this box, and, you know, I mean, back when we started getting into wargaming, I don't know about you, but we were playing with, like, books with a mat over the top.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Polystyrene. You know, you're going to get quite an impressive looking battlefield for very minimal effort.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the woods and stuff. If I was being picky, I'd probably replace those with some railway train kind of woods and the like.
Yeah.
And maybe some rocks and stuff, but again, with this being a kind of everything you need to play the game out of the box,
yeah,
it means that you don't have to worry about having an existing terrain collection. Now we have got the range ruler. That is in a custom measurement, isn't it? It's not in centimetres or inches. It's in its own little thing.
Yeah, it's like 1.5 centimetres, I think, is also.
I do believe that they give you a conversion chart if you want to use like normal measurements. So I don't know how.
Yeah, it's
these might get a bit tatty over time. Is my only worry.
Yeah. I mean, I suspect there'll be lots of third-party sort of things you can buy.
Yeah.
But the Infinity system uses centimetres or inches, and they decided to sort of create a standard here.
I guess it's something between the two. That stems to some markets, obviously a metric, and some aren't.
Yeah.
So I get the kind of having their own custom thing.
Warcrow uses squares, circles, and
yeah, exactly. Yeah. For the same reason, really. So that's really cool. And obviously you get 2 of those rulers as well, so each player's got one.
Yeah.
Again, with it not being a massive playing surface, you don't necessarily need to tape measure anyway. You can probably get away with those.
No, and I remember as well when we played the game, and obviously we'll talk about this when we get the game to the table in the article, is the actual movement of miniatures as well. It's a bit more relaxed.
It is, yeah. So essentially, I mean, we'll look at this in a little bit when we go through the rule, but you put the ruler at one end of the miniature, and then your model can go on the other side of that.
Yeah.
So it's not as particular.
Yeah.
This dial is a key thing in the game as well, and essentially special events happen when you hit certain turns. So the little plastic nub that we had earlier, that'll plug in there with that. There's a nice little dial for kind of recording stuff.
There was a snowstorm came in, didn't it? At a certain turn. It has impacts on the game, and that's all defined in the missions, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we'll do now is have a look at the rules and see how it plays.
Okay, so let's take a look at the sort of rule book that comes in the box. So this isn't a full rule book. This is what it says here, an introductory booklet. So this is like a sort of almost getting started. Teaches you the basics of Warcrow. Introduces the 2 factions that are included in the box. And then there's also a really neat sort of scenario campaign at the end that you can play through as well. So it's a good book. So if we take a look through, there's some lovely artwork in here as well. So the book starts off by introducing the sort of Warcrow setting, the universe. Lindworm is the sort of world that the game takes place on. Warcrow is the name of this moon, and there's cycles of magic that are sort of occur in the world. And as these sort of cycles of magic wax and wane, obviously has an impact on the various factions that sort of live in Lindworm. So it talks a little bit about the different sort of races that inhabit the world here. Obviously we've got the hegemony of Embersig, which is the sort of main force in the world. This is a sort of it reminds me a bit of Stormwind, actually. It's like elves and dwarves and humans all living together. And then also the Northern Tribes, which is the other faction in this box. These are the Orcs and the Varanks, which are almost like shamanistic shapeshifters that sort of allies with them. But it also hints at other factions, which I think you can see more info on the Warcrow website itself. Sorry. The Dwarfs of Mount Haven, the sort of Wood Elf faction, the Sienam Elves. And other factions in here as well, a few of them. It also introduces this concept of the fog, which is like a mysterious sort of magical force that's of unknown origin, that's sort of creeping into the world and corrupts things and twists things, and it has a real impact on the sort of the security of the different factions that live in Warcrow, and they have to Lindworm, so they have to deal with this. So yeah, so here we get first a good introduction to the hegemony of Embersig. It talks about some of the different units that are included in the box as well. And then also the Northern Tribes. And what's really cool here when I was reading through these is that it's all tied to the narrative of this box, the winds from the north. So the story plays out with the Northern Tribes here, the Orcs and the Varanks. They're coming in from sort of invading the Northern Territories, this sort of frozen sort of local here. And the hegemony of Embersig are dispatching a force to try and repel this invasion.
So it's got a very kind of like narrative vibe, this game then?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So that's all of the sort of background there and the sort of lore, and the sort of sets the stage for the rest of the book. And then we get to the sort of middle section of the book, which is a learn to play. And again, this isn't a full set of rules. They're available on the website, I think, to download for free, but it's quite comprehensive. So you're first introduced to sort of the profiles of the different units that you'll be using in the game. And, you know, we go into much more detail in the written article on the website about this, so I won't spend too much time here talking about it. But it sort of explains what all the different characteristics are, your attack, your movement, what these various other stats mean, like willpower, morale. Some of this will look familiar as well if you're coming from Infinity. So obviously you can see this move value here looks very familiar to what you would see in Infinity, and the availability as well when you're sort of constructing your warband, your army. It talks about the different types of unit you can include in a warband. So you've got individual units, single models. These can be sort of characters, officers, leaders. But then you also have units that are constructed from several models. So like a unit of the Bookman, for example, which consists of 4 or 5 models. So it sort of explains how all that works here. Characters as well are very interesting because characters have their own profile. So, for example, in the book, you've got the Hetman for the Hegemony of Embersig and the Rathmane for the Northern Tribes. These are characters, they're formidable characters on their own right, and you can use them independently. Or what you can do is you can attach them to units. They become part of that unit then, and you slide the sort of profile card underneath the troops profile card. And it applies a bunch of bonuses and buffs. You know, it might increase their attack, give them some extra special abilities to sort of represent the leadership qualities of this model as it sort of joins this unit. That's really, really cool.
It's quite an interesting mechanic, isn't it? Because you've got pros and cons to using them by themselves, because they're still powerful, you know, units by themselves, or enhancing your other units. And I guess it's weighing up what's the best option.
Exactly, yeah. And there's like passive abilities and skills that they might bestow on a unit. So I reckon, you know, as we see more and more models released for the different factions, there'll be lots of different combinations and synergies that you can play around with. We then get a sort of brief introduction into the way you sort of measure distance in this game. It uses its own unique scale called strides. So one stride is equivalent to, I think it's 15 millimeters, half of one of the regular infantry bases. Which is, I mean, a Warcrow does something similar. It has its own sort of...
Yeah, Kill Team has its own little kind of plastic doofer, doesn't it? That has the different ranges on there. Now, I know for ease, a lot of people like just inches or centimetres, but because Warcrow is going to be in different territories, some places use inches, some places use centimetres. So I think one of the things they wanted to try and do was consolidate that into their own measuring system. I think you can probably easily convert it into whatever you use, but when we've been playing some practice games, the little range doofer that comes in the box is actually really handy for doing units.
It is, yeah, and you get the little one which has the, you know, a 2-stride, 3-stride, 4-stride, 5-stride sort of measurements around the outside of it. This one here, in fact, but then you get the big ruler as well. And I found this one really good because it's 2 strides in width, so you can sort of hang it. So that's the sort of measurement you use when you're moving, measuring range, that kind of thing. There's a little bit here about unit formation, and I think it's worth just talking a little bit about this. So, because I think it's really, really cool. This sort of set of rules here, this mechanic here, really, really sort of streamlines and speeds up, you know, how you maneuver units and models in this game. So, if we take the example of the Bookman, so you've got 3 or 4 Bookmen in a unit. One of those models will be a leader. And basically all measurements, when you're moving the model, is taken from that leader. So if you wanted to move that leader up the board, that unit up the board, you'd first move the leader, and then you'd just move the rest of the models into formation with that leader. And then you just basically have to be 2 strides away from them. You can see in this diagram here. So you don't need to worry about moving every single individual model. You just move the leader, and then you position these guys around. And it can be really, really useful because you can create sort of defensive lines around your leader. You can create choke points. It really, really gives you a lot of options in the sort of the movement element of this game.
It gets rid of a lot of the finicky stuff that you see in games as well, with people kind of being fussy about fractions.
Exactly, yeah.
You move a single model, and the rest can move around, and it doesn't really matter because it abstracts the movement of
it. Does, yeah, and it's really, really streamlines it, speeds it up, simplifies it. Now, I mean, the position of those other models is still important because they still have a presence on the battlefield. They can block movement. You know, you have to be able to engage them in combat, that kind of thing. But yeah, it takes the hassle out of movement completely.
You originally look at the little range kind of ruler thing, and you think, well, okay, I'm not moving very far, but actually, when you come to like rearrange your unit, you've got some models that can actually move quite a bit further, and you can do some clever things.
This is it. Yeah, it's quite, and I think that's really going to be really an interesting strategy, because you're right. So I mean, it's probably going to be worth actually if we just grab a little model, and I'll just quickly show you. Yeah, so I mean, actually, it's probably easier just to demonstrate this, but it's quite quick actually. So what we'll do here is we'll grab a couple of the Bookman. So we'll set them up in a formation. They have to be 2 strides away from the leader. So the guy here with the hetman with the, not the hetman, sorry, just the troop leader with the feathers there. So we can see they're in formation here, and then we might want to move the Bookman up the battlefield. And unlike games like 40k, what we do here instead is you put the ruler down. And it's all from the troop leader, and you just move him onto the other side. And that's it. So you can see there what Matt was saying. You've straight away got more distance than you would ordinarily think just by looking at how far you've moved. And then what you do with these guys is you just position them as long as they're 2 inches away, 2 strides away from the troop leader.
We've all seen games where you've got kind of wonky tape measures and no one quite agrees on range. Because the ruler basically goes between the starting base and the ending base, gets rid of all that complexity, doesn't it? Yeah,
so, and I mean, you can form these into any formation you want. You can form defensive lines, choke points. I really liked it. It made the games really cool, and you know, took the hassle out of movement really. So yeah, so that's the sort of distance and a sort of introduction into the unit formations. It also talks about the dice. So this is the other unique thing about Warcrow. It doesn't use like D6s, it uses a custom D8. These have special symbols on. So you've got the red, orange and yellow, which are primarily your offensive dice, and your green, blue and black, which are your defensive dice. And they've got various symbols on them. So we have sort of shields, these stars indicate damage, and then there's these exclamation marks as well. And basically what we'll find as we move through the book is you can sort of activate the symbols on these dice as you roll them to inflict damage, to block damage and to trigger special abilities. The way you use these dice is either a simple or face-to-face roll. So these again are sort of familiar concepts that come from the Infinity game. And it's pretty cool because basically you're rolling with your opponent at the same time. You know, you're in a melee combat, you'll be rolling to attack whilst your opponent is also rolling to defend at the same time. And you're comparing dice rolls then, you know, you're using the shields to block damage and that kind of thing.
Well, one thing I like with that as well is that, as you can see from this little chart here visually, you can see as the colours change, the chance of possibilities increases. So you can kind of gauge how they're going to do by the colours in the opposing player's hand as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you know, you might not want to necessarily go for the more damaging dice. You might want to be looking for some of these symbols instead to trigger special effects. You'll notice some of the symbols are blocked in, and some of them are hollow. This is used in various sort of phases of the game and parts of the game, which are covered later in the rules. That's sort of the basics of how to, you know, measure what dice to use, that kind of thing. To introduce the sort of main mechanics and rules of the game, there's a tutorial scenario.
I think it's safe to say this game is very much framed as a learn to play box rather than the full rules as well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it does talk about this as you're going through the scenario. It references the full rule book, but I mean, there's plenty in here. You know, you feel like you're playing a proper game of Warcrow as you go through this book. So the tutorial scenario does a really good job of explaining how to read a scenario, how to set up a battlefield, where to deploy models, what models to include, and then talks you through the various sort of phases of the game. Introduces the sort of the turn structure of the game. So each game of Warcrow is played over a number of rounds, and each of those rounds contains a number of turns, and this is all defined in the scenario. And you use this sort of cool turn counter to keep track of this. Each game round, one of the players will have initiative for that round, and they'll decide who activates first in a particular turn. And what you do is you basically take it in turns, activating individual models or units in your warband. So on turn 1, the Hegemony of Embassy have initiative. They would activate one model or one unit, and then it would be the opponent's turn 1. They would activate a unit. When you've played for a number of turns equal to that round, you progress on to the next round. You determine initiative again, and then you carry on like that till the end of the game. It'll also explain how the games are scored. And this is interesting actually, because at the end of this book there's 3 scenarios that form a campaign, and they have their own sort of scoring mechanics and things like this, which we'll come to later. But generally in a scenario that's what you'll see. It talks a little bit about how you sort of control and score objectives in the game. So often scenarios will have objective markers scattered around, and you basically have to be in proximity of the objective marker to flip it to your side. It will explain in the scenario how you sort of control and score for that. Then you sort of walked through a round over the next few pages in the tutorial, and it goes through all the different things you can do in your turn. So when you activate a unit, you can perform 2 actions with it, and this is the list of actions you can do. So you can move, you can attack, you can perform a skill, or you can cast a spell, or you can combine those 2 actions into a single action called a long action, where you can assault or charge. When you activate a unit, you put an activation marker against it to show that that unit's activated. Now, it's really interesting, this game is, because you can activate that unit again in later turns, but by doing so, there's a chance you'll stress that unit, and stress is a really cool sort of unique sort of mechanic in this game, which we'll talk about later. But there's consequences of stressing a unit, but having that option to activate a unit a second time might catch your opponent off guard, and it's sort of like a risk-reward sort of strategy that you have to think about. Movement in this game, we sort of explained it briefly earlier. What you may have noticed on the profile cards is that a unit has 2 move values. So if you flip back here, I don't know, we can see here at the top, there's a 3 and a 3 for the movement of the booklet, and then a number in brackets 9. Basically, when you perform a move action, you move in a straight line. So you have to choose a direction and you move in a straight line. You move up the value of your first value, then you can move in a straight line again in up to the distance in the second value. And you don't have to do it in that order. You could choose the second value first and then the first value, but it basically means you can move sort of twice in 2 directions during a move action. And we skip forward here again. And then basically this bit just sort of tells you really, and this bit here we talked about where you move the model over the distance rather than edge to edge like you would ordinarily in something like Warhammer or Warhammer 40k. So the first tutorial talks you through moving the Bookman up towards the objectives. You can see on the map here it sort of instructs you on what to do. And then in turn 2 it introduces the concept of charging. So charging and assaulting are 2 ways that you can move units into close combat to fight. They're both double actions, long actions. Charging gives you some further benefits in the subsequent melee attack. It lets you re-roll your attack dice, which is really strong. And at first I was scratching my head to think, well, why would you ever assault? Why, you'd always charge. But there is a restriction on charging, that you have to have line of sight to your opponent when you declare that charge. And when you charge, you move up that full distance, so the 10 here in the brackets for the Orc Hunters. Assaulting, on the other hand, it doesn't give you that bonus in the subsequent melee attack. You can't re-roll your dice, but it does let you sort of move into combat with a unit that is out of line of sight. So if you've got to get around a wall or a piece of terrain or something like that, you would assault.
From a defensive point of view, if you try and stop charges, it's going to give you a big advantage.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to be charged, I don't think. So this turn 2 of the tutorial, walks you through a charge action, which is really good. I really enjoyed it. It was a really good way to learn the game, walking through this this tutorial scenario. And then you're in combat. Then the Booklemen are in combat with the Orcs, and how do you do your melee attack? Yeah, so let's have a look at the sort of stats we would use when you're making a melee attack. So you can see this is the profile card here for the Orc Hunters, and you can see here we've got sort of 2 areas of the card. So this is really cool as well. So an Orc Hunter sort of unit can contain 2 models or 3 or more models, and as the sort of unit takes casualties, you're removing models, or maybe the unit wasn't that big to start with. Their sort of proficiency in combat and on the battlefield degrades. So you can see a full unit of 3 or more Orc Hunters would roll all these dice when they come to attack. So you would collect these dice, that would form your dice pool. You may have abilities. There may be a leader joined to the unit that you want to grant some additional bonuses or some additional damage or something like that. So you take that into account as well. Likewise, your opponent would roll the equivalent defense on their card. And then what you're doing then is you're looking to sort of roll more damage than your opponent rolls blocks. And you may have some reroll abilities. You may have some other bonuses or things that sort of contribute to the symbols that you would roll. You may also have some abilities that you can trigger with the switches. So these are the other symbols on dice, like the exclamation mark. So you can see here that the hopefully it's in focus okay for you. That the Orc Hunters, if they roll 2 exclamation marks, they can inflict a vulnerable state on their opponent, which gives you further sort of benefits in combat as well. So that's how combat works. Once you've tallied up all the damage you're doing and how much damage the opponents have managed to sort of block, you determine the combat result. So the unit or the side that's done the most damage wins the combat, and then there's like a push and shove sort of thing that goes on. You can choose to the losers fall back, and you can choose to follow up if you like and re-engage them. And this is really cool because there could be an opponent on an objective, you decide to charge in, you win that combat, you push the opponent off the objective, and then you consolidate around that objective and you flick it back onto your side. It's a really sort of push and pull. Reminds me a bit of Shatterpoint, that sort of backwards and forwards.
And obviously the forces in this box are quite small because it's for learning the game, but I suppose as you get into the full game, when you have more units and more going on, you could set things up to maybe take the hit on one unit, then counter-charge with something else to then consolidate back onto the objective.
Yeah, and you've always got to think in your mind as well that the opponent can activate a unit again if they wanted to, then they could try and stress that unit. So I really like the sort of melee combat in this game. This really just talks about what we spoke in there, how to sort of tally up how much damage you've done, how to trigger any special abilities, that kind of thing. And then here we go. So it does talk a little bit about stress here. So again, if we bring the Orc Hunters back, you can see that they have a value here called morale 1. Now this is their basic morale value. If you attach other sort of leaders to this unit, that might modify that value 1 or 2. But basically what that means is that's the sort of limit of stress tokens this unit can accumulate until they have to start testing to see whether they're demoralized. So, you know, ordinarily you would activate this unit to have no stress on it, it would make its attacks, and there we go. Then you might want to, in the second turn, attack with this unit again. That's where you would apply a stress token. And then at the end of that turn, you would have to test it. Has it got more stress tokens than morale? And if it does, you have to do a willpower roll. So willpower is another stat on the card here. So for this one, it's an orange dice. And basically what you're looking for when you take this sort of willpower roll is you're looking for at least 1 success, so 1 damage symbol on the dice. If you get that, then you're okay. You've managed to sort of keep on top of things. Otherwise, you then become demoralized. And there's rules towards the end of the sort of tutorial that explain, you know, what the impact of being demoralized is. Obviously there are ways during the game to increase and reduce stress. Some of the units have rules which can sort of remove stress markers from units in their army, and that's a really strong mechanic because that would allow you to do that extra activation with that unit, or maybe a third activation with that unit potentially.
And I guess as we see more units introduced, there'll be more elite ones that maybe have, like, you know, higher morale values.
Yes, exactly, yeah. Range combat works in pretty much the same way as the sort of melee combat. You construct your dice pool in the same way, but in this instance the opponent isn't able to do any damage back to you. You know, they're more focused with just trying to duck away from any arrows or bullets and things that are coming their way. But it would work how it would sort of, you'd expect, sort of range line of sight and that kind of thing. Casting a spell is really cool. So in the box you get 2 spellcasters. On the Northern Tribes side it's the Evoker, and on the Hegemony of Embersig it's the Frostfire Herald. And casting a spell is an action that you can do, and this is really cool. So if we let's have a look and see if we can find. So here we go. We've got the Evoker's card here. So the Evoker has 2 spells that she can cast. One is the Spirit of the Firma Pelosaurus, and the other one is Summon the Rock. And basically when you cast a spell, you take a willpower test, really. So you'd roll a dice for your willpower stat. So here it's 2 orange and 1 yellow. And you're looking for a success. And as long as you get a success, the spell is cast. What you can also do, though, is you can decide to sort of modify the spell. And you can see in each of the spells they've got these extra bits here where you can roll these extra black dice. And if you choose to do that, you'll roll the black dice as well. But what the black dice do is they make the spell harder to cast, and any shields that come up on those black dice will cancel out some of the successes on your willpower dice. So again, it's this risk reward. Do you risk it? Now, the advantages of casting some of these extra sort of modifications for your spells can be quite good. The downside is, however, is that you're more likely to accumulate something called tinge, and this is almost like a corruption, or like a chaos sort of influence on the character, like the feedback from the magic. And as you accumulate this tinge, it has negative effects on the model itself. And there's a table at the end of the book which explains what tinge can do. It can stress you out, it can demoralize you, it can make you slow, it can even have an impact on units that are standing or within range of this particular model. So it's something you've really got to keep an eye on. You're not accumulating this too much tinge. Or
that's an interesting take on a kind of failed casting mechanic as well, isn't it? Because rather than having a single kind of okay, I failed this cast and something bad happens, you've got persistent bad effects that might build during the game.
Yeah, that's it. And the more tinge you've got, when you come to cast subsequent spells, they also add these black dice into the mix. So it gets harder and harder. You get more and more overwhelmed with this tinge. If you roll some of the symbols on dice, I think it's the exclamation mark, then you have to straight away consult the tinge table to see what impact it has had on your character. It's really fun. I really like it.
Magic's a dangerous thing to use in this universe.
It is, yeah, and I suspect there's going to be some ways to sort of manage tinge and reduce tinge. I also hope there's some sort of models that may utilise tinge in some way.
Yeah. To something. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really like the way Magic's sort of used in this game. And then you sort of get to the end of the tutorial. I'm not going to ruin much because there's some surprises in this tutorial scenario. And you're sort of onto the advanced sort of rules now, or the more advanced rules. And there's some mechanics which you're sort of not introduced to yet here. I'll only talk briefly about these because we go into much more detail in the article. One thing I want to say though is that on this dial that we use for tracking turn order and who's got initiative, many of the scenarios will place events on certain points on this dial, and when the turn counter reaches them, it will trigger some kind of event. That might be a snowstorm that comes in and slows down units, or it might be the appearance of some monster that crawls out of a cave or something like that. Just to add a bit of flavour to the scenario and a bit of a sort of random element to it. I really like that. What this dial can also do is, so we talked earlier about stress and what stress can do to a unit. If a unit accumulates too much stress and fails their willpower rolls, they can become demoralised, and when they're demoralised, they sort of become ineligible to act for a number of turns. Okay. And you would put a mark on this dial to indicate when that unit can react, start acting again.
Remove some of the bookkeeping that you've got to do as a player, because you just wait for that turn to come up.
Exactly, yeah. So you get basically a small token and a larger token with the same number on. You'd put the small token next to the unit and the large token on here. And when this dial reaches that large token again, you'd find the corresponding small token, and that unit is then able to try and rally and get back into the fight.
That's a nice clean way of doing it.
Yeah, it's good. It means you can track pretty much everything on this, which is really cool. Some of the units as well, especially the characters, they have abilities, command abilities. We're familiar with this if you come from Age of Sigmar. I think 40k even has sort of bits like this now. Every player will get a number of command tokens at the beginning of a scenario, and this is just a pool that they can exhaust through the course of a game to activate these sort of command abilities that appear on some of the unit profiles, just to give you some special abilities or some influence on a game. These don't cast any activation points, so you can use these at any point. Obviously, the player of initiative gets sort of priority on them, but it's just another resource that you can keep track of during your game and make use of during your game.
Cool. So do you think with that intro scenario, people will be able to pick up the game and learn to play that?
Yeah, that intro scenario, it's like watching a tutorial video. It's a really good way to learn the game, and I have to say, I went through it myself, just playing against myself, it's a really interesting way to learn the game. So I think they've done a really good job there.
That's nice, because this box from Corvus Beli is very much a starter box. I do wonder if this gets followed maybe with a more traditional kind of 2 bigger forces and a core rulebook kind of thing.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, with the main rules. Yeah, I'd like to see that, but I mean, I can't fault this. I think this is a really, really good way, and I think the quality of the book is so good. You know, the artwork, the layout. I mean, some rule books can be a bit of a drag to read, but I didn't find that with this one.
And some starter products can be a bit cheap feeling, but all the cards and the components are decent quality.
The quality of this, yeah, it's fantastic. I cannot fault it at all. Yeah, so we sort of come to the end of the tutorial there. It talks a bit about states, so you can inflict certain states. Units can be slowed, frightened, this kind of thing, as you'd expect. There's keywords as well on some of the cards, which sort of interact with some rules. It sort of explains them. Here's the tinge effects that we talked about here. So you can see here, this is a table you'll roll on. The unit could be stressed. Units within 5 strides of this unit might become frightened.
Nice.
It gets the intimidating rule. Really, really cool. And then we come to the campaign that's included. So like half the book is given over to this campaign. This is a free scenario campaign. I don't want to spoil the narrative really, but there's a narrative that runs through it.
It's one of those ones that I guess you want to kind of experience for yourself rather than we show you too much of.
Exactly, yeah, definitely, because there's a lot of sort of lore and story that's gone into it. It's not quite a branching campaign, but there are, you know, you can see here there's a bit of fluff here to read for the hegemony of Embersig, then some for the northern tribes, and then depending on how well each side scored and which objectives they achieved and that kind of thing, you'll see that they get different paragraphs to read. You know, you've done this event, you can read that. If you lost, you can read this one.
It kind of reminds me of Frosthaven and some of the kind of world building that does between games.
Oh yeah, it's really, really fun. There's lots of little achievements and things to achieve as you play through. There's certain elements of the scenario that only certain models can interact with, so there's, you know, you don't have to, they're almost optional, but they might give you an advantage later on in the campaign, or unlock a little bit more story or something like that.
Corvus Beli have always been traditionally fairly light on the rule book front. You know, they do sell rule books and narrative books, but a lot of it's like app driven and free online. This is a great opportunity for them to do like campaign books with this kind of narrative growing it, and it builds the universe as well.
It does. It's a really good world building sort of thing there. I really like how the scenarios explain how to place the scenery, how to set up the board. You know, there's no well, is that enough scenery, do we place it there? It sort of dictates exactly how you set it up. And then there's a really, really cool campaign tracker at the end. So, you know, you can play through this, you can see how many achievements and things you've managed to unlock and how many points you managed to score, and then you flip the teams around, then you go again on the other side, you know, you switch armies.
And this campaign just uses the contents of the box, doesn't it? You don't need any additional models.
It just uses the contents of the box. Now, I don't want to spoil too much of the campaign, but there are certain things that are introduced during the campaign for which there aren't models, but there are cardboard tokens for.
Presumably, we probably will get models for them at some point.
Oh yeah, I think I've seen models for these in the Warcrow Adventures Kickstarter actually. Cool. There's like you know, there's some things that might come in that are controlled by an AI, you know, not really controlled by either player, which I thought was really, really cool.
So the plan is at some point, maybe in a couple of weeks, we'll start playing through this campaign and do a series on the site as well.
Yes, definitely, yeah. Awesome.
So, wow, should we take a look at the awesome models in the box?
Okay, so that's the sort of introductory booklet there that we talked about. You also get lots of cool models in the box as well. So let's take a look at some of these now. So I am still working through these, painting these, but this is sort of work in progress. So if we start with the Hegemony of Embersig. This character here is the sort of main leader of the warband. This is Drgo the Anvil. He's a Hegemony of Embersig officer. He's got a really, really cool story actually, and it's all in the book. He's like a trainer, trains the new recruits, and he's by all accounts he should be much more high rank than he is, but he likes to stay with the recruits, training recruits, leading the first recruits into battle. So he's got a really, really cool story. He's armed with like a sword and a pistol. The models themselves are like a soft plasticky resiny type material. They've got a bit of, not flex to them, but you know, if you were to drop them on the table, they wouldn't break. There's a bit of give to them. A bit of spring, yeah.
Forge World are a lot more fragile. If you dropped a Forge World model, an arm would probably drop off. But these seem to be a bit more durable for play, don't they?
Yeah, really, really nice detail on these ones. Then we get the, these are sort of your rank and file, the Bucklermen. And it hints in the book at other units in the sort of Ember Sig's army, and this is just one of them, armed with the bucklers and the swords. So they've got lots of little cool details on them. Pouches and the scabbard there. This is the troop leader, so this will be the one that you measure all your movement from and that kind of thing, and position all of the other sort of models in the unit around him in formation.
From a gameplay mechanic as well, I like that he's distinct with his like feather, so you can call it out.
Yeah.
Anyone who's interested in the Bookman as well, Corvus Beli are demoing the game at a few events this year, and I believe if you play a demo game, you do get a free Bookman to take home as well.
Oh yeah, cool. So these are the Bookman. Then what's really, really cool as well, just like Infinity, they're all in unique poses. So you have a small warband of these, and each model looks distinct, unique and characterful. I really like the sort of red scarf that some of these ones have around the neck. The armour's really, really cool. Lots of detail. It's like it was, a bit of an effort really to pick out all the sort of rim of the armour, but I think they're really, really nice. This is a really, really cool one. So this is the War Surgeon. So obviously this is a model that you can use on its own. It's got its own profile, or you can attach it to a unit. And when you attach it to a unit, it gives that unit lots of cool passive abilities. It gives it a form of damage mitigation. So each time the unit takes damage, you can roll this unit's willpower, and every success you roll on this unit's willpower roll, you can remove some damage. And what's really, really cool is there's some great synergies. So the Drgo the Anvil, the Hetman character we showed earlier, he has an ability that anyone that can see him can use his willpower instead of their own, and he's got some really, really cool high willpower stat. So you can straight away see the sort of combinations you can build there. This War Surgeon as well can also sort of throw these poison vials she pulls out of a bag to inflict damage on an opponent, bypassing armour and that kind of thing. So that's really, really cool. The background for these models is sort of described in the book as well. So these are not like your sort of magical sort of healer type character. The War Surgeons are properly educated, professional doctors and surgeons, so
science and magic in this.
Exactly, yeah, like almost steampunk. It's quite cool.
Awesome.
And then last but not least, this is one of the elves of the Hegemony of Ember Sig. So this is a Frostfire Herald, can wield frost magic and fire magic. I'm thinking about it actually. I wish I'd done either the book or the staff in like a flame rather than the frost. Again, a really, really nice model. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more of the range, and they do sort of give me the sort of Stormwind World of Warcraft.
There's a big World of Warcraft vibe with the models. We're going to see the Orcs in a minute, and they are very Warcraft.
So we'll start with, the Orcs are not as far along, so these have got their base colours down, so I am still working on these, but I think it's still worth...
On the full article, we should have some fully painted images, and that'll be up on the same time as this article, so if you do want kind of a deep dive into the game and some better photos of all the models as well, head to spruesandbrews.com, where Jay, you've done a full write-up of Winds from the North. Yeah,
so this is I think his name is Albarak. He's a Wrath main. So a bit like Warhammer Orcs, the biggest, baddest Orcs tend to be the leaders of that particular tribe or warband. And when they sort of move into that position, their mane turns a fiery red colour. Which is why he's got red hair, Wrath mane. He's a really, really... you can see how big this guy is compared to the War Surgeon. He's a beast. You don't want to be messing with him, do you? No. He's wearing lots of, bone plates and this bone skull of some mammoth or monster or something that he's obviously been fighting in the Northern Lands. Yeah, he's a really, really cool character. Sort of second in command for the... not this guy, Northern Tribes, is this one. This is the Wise Mane. So he is an ex-Wrath Mane. So he used to be the leader of a tribe, but then he's been displaced. But the tribe still values his knowledge, his experience, his leadership. So this guy is like a... when I was sort of reading his background, looking at his rules, he reminded me of like a chaplain for 40k, spiritual
like
leader.
A lore master or something.
Yeah. So he's not too shabby in a fight, but he does a really, really good job of sort of cooling people's heads. You know, all the other orcs that might want to be rushing around and fighting, he does a sort of steadying sort of
if we're going for
presence.
a World of Warcraft villain, kind of thrall kind of character.
Yeah. I mean, he's got a really nasty looking club there, and this guy is covered in sort of bones and skulls and plates and things like that. Again, a really, really imposing and sort of dynamic looking model there.
Nice.
Then we come to the rank and file, which are your Orc Hunters. So these are equipped with a variety of single-handed axes, double-handed axes. They're wearing like sort of chain mail or some kind of armour.
I really like how big
leather
these
pelt.
models are. For your basic infantry, they are properly like crowded over those bases, aren't they?
They are, yeah. And they've really got some really nice dynamic poses with them as well. So this guy here is sort of like launching forward. There's a collection of male and female models as well, which is nice.
Yeah, I think at the minute, out of the factions out of the scene, I think these are my favourite. But I hear there's more kind of demonic-y stuff on the horizon, maybe.
Yeah, if you go onto the Warcrow website, they've got like a section on each of the factions, and there are some nice chaosy looking factions. I think you'll like mine. But I mean, I agree with you. I was really impressed with these Northern Tribe models. They've been really, really nice models to paint up until now. I know they're not finished, but they're very detailed. But because they're quite big and chunky, they're not difficult to paint.
They'd probably take quite well to like contrast and stuff as well if you wanted to get them painted quickly for the battlefield.
I think they would, yeah. So these guys have just got their base colours down. So yeah, I was planning to put some sort of contrast or wash over them to add a bit of definition to them. But I mean, they're great for sort of tabletop standard already, I think.
Yeah.
So they're your Orc Hunters, and then the last model, which is sort of work in progress still. I've not had much time to finish this one yet. This is the Ioka. So she's the magic caster for the Northern tribes.
She's a really nice model as well.
She is a really nice model. I'll try and get her in focus here. I mean, these models come in multiple parts. There's no instructions for them, but they're very, very straightforward to build. There was no like, where does this part go? You've basically just attached a couple of arms.
They're not numbered. Separate baggies, though, aren't they?
They're in separate bags, yeah. So I had no problem putting these together without instructions. This one was really interesting as well because there's lots of like gaps where she's sort of leaning over, and it's the way this model's put together really impressed me actually. I found there's a bit of what you call is it flack or what is it?
Flash on it.
Flash on it, yeah, that you have to take off some of these models, but it's not too difficult.
Yeah, I mean, Corvus Beli have done a lot of metal in the past. I think they're slowly starting to move to resin, aren't they?
Yeah, is this thermoplastic? I don't know, I can't recall now what I'll try and find out and I'll put it into the article. But yeah, so that's all the models. And I mean, I want to say they're the star of the show, but I have to say the scenery you get is also really, really cool.
And this is just Pushfit cardboard scenery. And when you turned up here to start recording, I was like, oh wow, I'm quite impressed with that scenery.
Yeah, this is really good. So Corvus Beli have always included like cardboard scenery in their Infinity sort of battle boxes.
Yeah, in that it's a lot of it's cyberpunk style.
It is
sci-fi buildings, which are a lot easier to put together than more organic stuff like that.
Yeah, that's it. But this is great. And I mean, when you've got this set up on so you get a 2x2 mat. So the scenarios are all on a 2x2 board. It's like a tundra sort of landscape, and you put these on it. It looks really, really good. I think it's quite motivating to get a small army painted quite quickly with a nice looking board quite quickly set up straight away. It sort of does make you want to keep playing the game.
Yeah, and this stuff, like the Pushfit stuff, some people kind of turn the nose up at, but you could easily kind of cut off the top of the pegs, glue it and add some paint, and it would just look like a model rather than cardboard.
Yeah, that's right. So you've got like a little shed or a barn here, a little sort of farmyard cottage. So the campaign sees you sort of playing out over some like little hegemony of MC farmsteads. Yeah, that's right. You get some little walls here as well, a couple of those in the box, some fences as well that you can put together, and then lastly you get these sort of templates, which these are probably the weakest scenery element that you get. They're all just 2D, but you've got like some barricades there, some rocks,
but that's
ruins.
Easy to kind of upgrade yourself, use the same template but add some like model trees.
Exactly, that's it. You just stick some trees on there. Yeah, I mean, and to get going with, that's cracking. That's really, really good.
So what's your kind of final thoughts on Winds from the North. Like, obviously we've got the full write-up on the website, but as a introduction to Warcrow and as a way of 2 players learning how to play, what do you think of the box?
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's exceeded my expectations. I think the quality of the components is very, very good. That's the scenery, the models, the book itself. I think the introductory booklet does a really, really great job of teaching you the game quickly. You know, that the tutorial scenario at the beginning walks you through the basics, and then as you play through the campaign, you'll pick up the rest. And I think by the time you finish playing through that campaign, and you can play through it multiple times, it's got that replayability, I think you'll be all but set then to pick up the main rulebook and start reading through the main rulebook. Hopefully by that point there'll be additional units and models available to purchase that you can start adding.
Well, that's a nice way to do it as well. People can get stuck with those 2 factions, and we're probably going to see a fairly slow kind of progression of those other units, but by the time people have had a chance to play through these scenarios, you know, if it's a couple of models every few months or something, you know, I'm not sure what the release plan is, but I'm sure we'll quickly get to the point where people have then got multiple factions to pick from, because that's traditionally one of the stumbling blocks on a new game, isn't it? If there's only 2 factions and that kind of railroads you a little bit on what you pick. This is a nice mid-ground, because you've got the full rules for the people who kind of maybe are experienced in war games and want to just jump in that side. You've got the people brand new to it who can use this starter box to learn everything. And then probably where we fall in the middle, where we want both experiences, the kind of how to play and here's a big collection of models to paint, but then also in the background we'll be working on our separate forces when the different releases come out.
Yeah.
So yeah, looks really, really good. So if you are interested in a full write-up of Warcrow, G's done a full article over on spruesandbrews.com.
Yeah, I go through all of the rules there in the book. There's a lot of stuff there we've not covered in that sort of flip through the book, but much more detail in the article.
Amazing. And we are planning on doing a lot more Warcrow content in the future. Like I say, we're planning on doing the campaign, and I think we'll get some battle reports stuff on the go once the rest of the range comes out. So if you have enjoyed this video, give us a follow, give the video a like, comment on what factions you're looking forward to in the game as well. I think there's a lot of cool stuff on the horizon, and you know, are you going to pick up this game? If you would like to support the site as well, if you use our affiliate link in the comment, you'll be able to get this through Element Games, and we get a little bit of a kickback, which helps support the site and goes towards the running costs for the servers and everything and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that'd be massively appreciated if you could. Stay tuned to the site if you want to see more Warcrow content in the future, and until next time, have a great week.